Okay, on this stop, I want to discuss the kind of the end game to the shelterwood method we talked about at our earlier stop locations. And so you saw how we come in, we measure a stand, we conduct a stand evaluation, we determine what material we're going to take out, what material we're going to leave. We determine our operations and our timings as far as if we're going to do any prescribed burning or mid-story injection. And then we come in and mark the stand and do that initial preparatory cut where we remove the smaller diameter material, the pulpwood size material, if you will, and then some of the saw timber, and we leave those seed producing trees and those trees that are going to create the sunlight environment that we're looking for. And so that's what you see behind me back here is the results. This is 10-year results right here on a research project that we conducted here on the station. And we went through all of those steps with this stand. We started out, we put our plots in, we did our injection work. The initial part of the study on this project, we were really focusing primarily on injection. We didn't bring fire in until later. And so we came in and did our injection work after we put our initial plots in to keep up with things over time. And we started out, we had some oak regeneration in here, but it was very small. For the most part, it was less than a foot in height. And so if we had just clear cut this stand, we probably would not have gotten a whole lot of oak regeneration back. And so one component of the project was to see if we could increase the oak regeneration through the shelterwood method. But this was a full-blown research project, and we looked at a lot of different variables in here. And one of the factors we wanted to keep up with, or one of the variables we wanted to keep up with, was the amount of sunlight reaching the ground. And in these upland hardwoods, like we have up here in North Arkansas and the Ozarks, the amount of sunlight that you receive from the top of the hill to the bottom of the hill can vary greatly. And then when you add in the density of the overstory into that, whether it's a very dense overstory where only 5 or 10% of the sunlight's penetrating the canopy, or you have a heavy midstory maybe intercepting the canopy, you throw that in, and once you head down to the bottom of the slope, oftentimes you have very little sunlight reaching the ground once you get mid-slope or lower, particularly on the north-facing slope. So if I was on a slope facing in the northern direction away from the sun and I have a dense overstory, I might have 5 or 6% sunlight reaching the ground at the bottom of that slope. And that's not enough sunlight for an oak seedling to survive and grow. They may hang on and have a leaf or two on them, but they're certainly not going to be in any kind of competitive position for you to release them and compete with the vegetation around them. With regard to sunlight, so what we saw in here, we did a couple of different harvesting methods in some areas, some treatments. We did harvesting with no mid-story removal, and in other treatments we did harvesting with mid-story removal, and then we had some stands that we just left alone to use as a control to follow the seedling pools in those as well. And what we found in this scenario, these were stands that were over 100 years old, or this stand was over 100 years old. It had a heavy mid-story component, and what we found was if we did not do the mid-story work, our sunlight levels were not adequate for oak regeneration to develop. And you might say, well, what is an adequate amount of sunlight for an oak to develop? Typically, we want a minimum of 30% of full sunlight. So we need some canopy gaps to create that. But what we're really looking for is about half shade and half sun, or maybe 40% sun and 60% shade for that early period of time. And if we didn't take the mid-story out, we didn't achieve that. We were still running 15, 20% sunlight, and it varied up and down the slope. You would have more sunlight up the slope and less sunlight as you move down the slope. But in this case, without the mid-story control, and it is a cost and it is time consuming, but it was necessary if we were going to properly regenerate this stand into oaks. And throughout the period, so our study ran for about 5 years. We're going to come back in and do a long-term analysis on this stand as it develops, and you can see the different cohorts developing behind me. We'll follow this over time to make sure the oaks maintain themselves through the development of this new forest. But after about 3 years of the shelter wood, so we did our injection work and we did our initial harvest. After about 3 years, we came in and put our plots in again. In the areas where we did the injection work, we were running 3,000 oaks to the acre on average. And where we did not do the injection work and we had that lower sunlight level, we were only running about 1,200 oak seedlings to the acre, which still isn't bad, but most of those were on the upper slope region. As you move down into the lower slope portions of those treatments, the oak regeneration still was not adequate in those areas. And so we didn't have a uniform, pool of oak seedlings in those treatments. It really took that mid-story work to do that. Of those 3,000 stems in the treatments where we removed the mid-story, about 600 or 700 of those per acre was in that 3 to 4 foot tall height range. And those are the seedlings we were really looking for to regenerate these stands into successful forest containing quite a bit of oak. And so today, these stands, as you can see behind me, this is 10 years down the road, this is 5 years post-harvest, and we have thousands of oaks per acre in here. And this is a very well-stocked stand with both red and white oak species. We have black oak in here as well. And this stand, it has other species in here. It still has hickory and maple and all of those things that we talk about doing a little bit of control on, but we have that oak component in place. One of the things I want to finish up with is the concept of incorporating fire into these stands. And I talked about earlier, on the station, we do our prescribed burns. They're linked to specific objectives, whether we're trying to create wildlife habitat or whether we're trying to supplement the regeneration process. Prescribed fire has a specific role, and we're very careful on how we implement fire in these systems. One of the things we did in this particular project was after year 3, and we had the final year of the measurements to summarize the injection work, we conducted a prescribed fire in here. And one of the things that we noticed that year following that, we had a reduction in our overall abundance of oak reproduction present in these treatments. And so that was a case where conducting the prescribed fire actually hurt our efforts to regenerate this into oaks, because we had just recently received all the acorns from our seed trees. They were really young and tender seedlings, and they couldn't handle the fire. And so the seedlings that were in place and had good root systems, they did fine. But we killed a few of the, some of the oak regeneration pool that was, say, less than a year old or a year old or so. And so that's an instance where if I have that component and I'm trying to develop that, I need to keep fire out of that system for a couple of years and let those develop. One of the tools we use fire for, though, let's say we did the shelter wood, we weren't happy with the results as far as the number of oak seedlings per acre that we have. That's a situation where I can use fire to kind of reset the stage, so to speak. I could burn it, put everything back to the ground. The larger oaks, the oaks that have been there for a little while, they're going to resprout. And then I've also created a new seed bed to accept acorns from our still existing seed trees and kind of start over. It's kind of like hitting the reset button, is what I like to say. And so there's different times where fire could be good and fire could be bad in the regeneration process. But overall, this was very successful. These oaks are anywhere from 8 to 15 foot tall throughout the stand here. And this is a couple of 100 acres of successfully regenerated oak forest. And that's the ultimate goal of what we're trying to do here. And all of the methodologies and evaluation methods and everything that we walked through today, that's really what we wanted to show you as a take-home point. There is a reward at the end if you go through and through a step-by-step process and follow these methodologies. You can maintain your oaks through time.